If I Fall by Danny Fantod. Jane wiped the sweat from her eyes. In the morning she had worn jacket and gloves against the chill. In the heat of the afternoon she shed as many layers as modesty would allow. Autumn in Kansas. She tied her sandy blonde hair back and stowed all in the trailer with her last remaining pieces. The Lanesfield Arts and Crafts Fair was one of the big sales events in the area. It was the last outdoor meet of the year and a last chance to move big items, make room for holiday inventory. The fashionable wives of Kansas City and surrounding area flocked to this rural grass airstrip, ready to make some offers. Jane didn't really need the offers, but she played the game anyway. She relied on repeat business and word of mouth. Every wind spinner, whirligig, or balance sculptor she put in a suburban yard meant 3 neighbors asking who made it. Ordinarily, this would have been Jane's favorite time of the year. She could take some time off to enjoy the fall weather, no more bugs, no grass to cut, spend some time by the fireplace with a radio and a set of knitting needles. This year would have been no different, if it were not for her dreams. The distant squeaking of leaf springs heralded Donnie's approach. Like it or not, it was time to go home. Donnie Sykes' old F-150 lumbered down the row. It was the same pickup that a generation of Park Lane High students had wrenched on when his father taught shop. Jane remembered learning to change the oil and tires on that very truck. It seemed like yesterday. Was it really 10 years ago? Nowadays, Donnie kept it up and running, and on market weekends he brought it home to make deliveries for the fashionable wives. Their Pathfinders and Navigators and Trailblazers were strictly for show. He pulled up next to her and gave her a wave. He backed around to the trailer and she guided him in the last few feet. While Jane hitched up, Donnie stood by his open door to change out of his work shirt. Jane tried not to glance at his bare shoulders through the windshield. Tried and failed. He pulled on a yellow t-shirt with Emporia State in black across the front. He folded the denim shirt with his embroidered name and put it in the truck's bed box. "Looks like you had another good day," he said, seeing the mostly empty trailer. "I feel guilty charging you for return trips." He checked the hitch, the chains, the cargo straps. She was annoyed the first couple of times he checked her work, but this was typical Donnie. He never cut corners, was never late, never swore. There was a time when Jane would have thought him a drag. She wondered why she would have ever thought that as he opened the passenger door for her and shut it behind her. Country music played softly on the AM radio. Donnie took his place behind the wheel and pushed the stick into first gear. They eased out on the dusty gravel road and started the journey back to Park Lane. They got to the blacktop on East 1900 before Donnie broke the silence of the drive. "You're awful quiet today. Everything all right?" Jane almost didn't answer. "I don't want the season to end." "Absolutely, it has been a great season." Donnie patted the wallet in his hip pocket. "But you have holiday marts coming up. Don't you do well at those?" Jane's internal sigh escaped her lips. "That's not what I meant." "Okay," he replied. When Jane didn't continue, he added, "Then what did you mean?" "I don't know. This year I just enjoyed the markets. Enjoyed riding in this old truck. Thank you for helping me with my trailer, by the way." "You're paying me, you know," he replied with a grin. Was he really this oblivious, or was he just playing? "I know, it's just that..." Jane's voice sounded ridiculous in her ears, but she pressed on. "I feel like I've been unhappy lately. Not just lately, I've been unhappy for a while." Donnie signaled a turn on North 700 and carefully looked both ways. "I don't get that feeling from you, Jane. You always seem happy to me." "That's because you were always so cheerful. I can't help but be in a good mood." She laughed, grazing his arm with her fingernails. "I catch your enthusiasm." "Glad I could help." He reached over and placed his hand on hers, a gesture that caught her by surprise. For a moment she thought about putting her other hand on his. Then the moment was gone and his hands were back at 10 and 2. Jane distracted herself by watching the patchwork of maple groves roll by. Harvesters were working the fields along East 1700, reminding her to make some corn husk wreaths. They stopped at the bank in Park Lane. The south wind had strewn the brick streets with fallen leaves. Teenagers on bikes loitered in the park. Jane paid Donnie $20 out of her zipper bag, which he happily stuffed in his wallet. Across the street, the Roland smoke truck was doing business in the liquor store parking lot. "Dinner's on me if you don't have other plans," she said, handing him another 20. Donnie sprang out of the cab like a shot and ran across the street. He would have stuck around for barbecue even if he had other plans. She counted out the rest of the bag and made the deposit. Before long, Donnie returned with a cardboard flat full of meat and beans and white bread. Jane was pleased he didn't forget the coleslaw. "You want anything to drink?" he asked. "I have pop at the house." "Do you have beer?" Jane looked at him curiously. "Are you 21? Ever so briefly, a look of annoyance flashed in his eyes. "Yes, ma'am, I am 21. "Then I have beer at the house." Jane shut her eyes and pretended the last 10 seconds didn't happen. It was dark by the time they got to her house and already too cold to eat at the picnic table, so she invited him in. He had never been in her home before, and she was nervous and excited about it. She set the kitchen table for two and set out 2 cold Budweisers. Donnie ate like it was his last meal and might be taken away from him at any moment. Jane only nibbled at some chicken and coleslaw, too nervous to eat. After dinner, she made a pot of coffee, and he wandered through her living room. She watched him scan the titles on her bookshelf, the compact discs by her stereo. He squinted at her collection of framed miniatures on the fireplace mantel. He joined her on the love seat. The casual contact of their knees made her uncomfortable, but she didn't pull away. This was the Johnsons' place, wasn't it? He gestured to the picture of an elderly couple that held a place of honor on her wall. "Yeah, Carol gave me a good deal on it when she sold the farm. It was nice of you to help her like you did." "They paid me, you know." "I know, but she got to spend her husband's last years with him, here in their house. She must have been glad to have you around." "I loved working for them. I used to think that people in love were just putting on a show for the world. It wasn't a show with them. 50 years later, they were still on their honeymoon." She tried to swallow the lump in her throat. "My parents couldn't stand each other. They fought all the time when they were married, tried to turn me against each other when they divorced. I grew up thinking that was how life was. I didn't want that for myself. I chose to be by myself and learned to be happy on my own. Then I met the Johnsons and saw a different way of life. I learned that people don't have to be alone, and they don't have to be saddled with people they hate." Donnie watched her wide-eyed, waiting for her to continue. "Still, I couldn't imagine that for myself. After Carol left, I went back to being comfortable being alone." "Comfortable?" Donnie asked, "but not happy?" "Donnie, since you started pulling my trailer, there's been Saturday and waiting for Saturday. Nothing else. Now that the season is over, I'm facing a season without Saturdays." She slipped her arm under his and pulled herself to him, pressing her lips softly to his for several echoing heartbeats. He kissed her back, not softly, embracing her with an eagerness that surprised and delighted her. Her hands felt the muscles of his shoulders. Months of growing tension melted away in an instant. After several long minutes, they separated, regarded each other's flushed faces with shining eyes. Finally, Donnie spoke. "So I'll see you next Saturday." "But there's no..." "Oh, yeah, I'll see you next Saturday."